Hey everybody, welcome back to Just My Two Cents. I'm super excited to be here with another video. So before we get started, remember to go ahead, like, share, and subscribe. And let's go ahead and jump right into this video. So before we get started, because the video today is very different than videos that I usually do for the channel. Usually I do product reviews, streaming service reviews, and other reviews and stuff like that. But today we are reviewing a TV show and I'm kind of excited. I did this before where I actually did a review on the Dave Ramsey student loan. I'll try to link it somewhere up here. Movie that came out a couple years ago, and that had pretty good feedback. So I'm excited to do this review right here about The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. Now, before we get started, I do want to say, I realize that Natalia Grace is a victim. I do not want to take that away from her at all. She is a victim. She was in a toxic and really messed up environment, and she has a lot of trauma that I saw through the documentary, that I perceived through the documentary. I feel like she has a lot of trauma from that. So I do want to say that I do realize she is a victim. I do realize that she was in a very toxic and messed up situation. And I do feel like she does have a lot of trauma. I had to say that twice because sometimes people hear you, but they don't understand you. So hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Like, I understand. We'll do it one more time. I understand that she is a victim. I understand she was in a toxic and mixed up environment when she was growing up. And I understand that she is currently, from my opinion, dealing with some trauma from all of that. But we have to talk about the red flags. And this review is going to be a little different because it's a lot of YouTubers already talking about the documentary. They're already talking about what season 1 entailed, about what season 2 entailed, but I want to take a different approach to talking about the documentary. I want to talk about some of the red flags that a lot of people who are doing these YouTube videos, creating this content for social media, some of the things that they aren't talking about. And even when you look in the comment section on many of these videos, a lot of people aren't even talking about some of these red flags that I caught on to and that I really want to just bring up for the sake of seeing, was it just me that saw this stuff or the other people see it, but because it's not politically correct to bring this up because they feel like she's a victim and we don't need to talk about what the victim is doing. So we're just going to avoid that conversation. That's why nobody's talking about it. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. That was a longer intro than what I had anticipated, but let's go ahead. If you haven't already watched season 1 and season 2 of The Curious Case of Natalia, and I think season 2 is called Natalia Speaks, it's currently on Discovery Plus. And if you don't have Discovery Plus, a lot of YouTubers and different content creators have went out and they have provided some really good reviews on it. Personally, I say watch it. Go watch it for yourself. You can watch the other reviews and stuff like that, but go watch it for yourself because it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack, and it's more to unpack than what I think we got time for on this video, because this video, I'm not going to be before you long, okay? I'm not. But so the first red flag I want to talk about that nobody else is talking about is the fact that, yes, Natalia is a victim from being in a toxic and messed up situation, but she has also put other people in the spot of being a victim from things that she has allegedly done to them. So everything I'll be talking about is based on what was presented in season 1 and in season 2. So in season 2, we see that there is a child that I don't know if it's the man's biological child or if it's the man's adopted child, but either way, the child is a part of the man's family. And this child stated during the documentary that Natalia bit her. And to me, it was kind of weird how the producers put that in there, but they didn't provide a lot of time to unpack that, because it seems like the young lady was very nervous with saying that Natalia bit her, and she didn't want to put Natalia in a bad light, but she bit the girl. Like, she bit her. According to the young lady, like, Natalia bit her. And I'm like, that is very weird behavior, because of the simple fact that when Natalia would have been living with them, even if she was, let's say, 8, 9, 10 years old, you know, at that particular age that you should not be biting anyone. You know, like, usually most people, they learn not to bite people around 2, 3, 4 years old, right? So she knew not to bite her. So you have they have this child who is being bit by Natalia. And I'm like, the producers put it in there. They didn't like unpack it at all. They didn't say what happened to Natalia afterwards. Did the mans talk to her? Did the child tell the mans about it? All you see is the young lady, she tells what happens to her. And then it fast forwards to her being adopted by the mans. And I'm like, that is just weird, because if I have a child and the child is telling me this person who we have taken in bites her, the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm just going to be real with this, the last thing I'm going to do is adopt that person, because I'm like, you're hurting my child. You know, you're hurting my child. You bit my child. And you understand at, you know, your big age of 8, 9, 10 years old that you should not be biting people, but you bit my child. So the last thing I'm going to do is adopt you. And I'm like, I think that should have definitely been unpacked a little bit more, because you have a child living in the household who has been bitten by her, and nobody talks about it. To me, it was just very weird. And it goes into some of the other instances where some of the neighbors have alleged that, first off, she's had like other run-ins with other kids. So if you remember back in season 1, if you haven't watched it, make sure you go ahead and you watch season 1 and season 2. But in season 1, they talk about when the Barnetts put Natalia in this apartment complex, how with one little boy, it's alleged that she was being inappropriate with him when they were rolling around in the grass playing or whatever, and how I believe it was the father came out and scolded Natalia and grabbed his son and walked away because she was being like inappropriate with him. And then one of the neighbors, I think her name is Sue, she was talking about how Natalia was being inappropriate with her grandson, and she told Natalia that, you know, that's completely uncalled for, and she scolded Natalia. And even with one of the adopted families, I think it was the family before the Barnetts, she had twisted or fell on the kid or whatever arm, allegedly, and the mom and dad saw it or caught it or whatever, and next thing you know, they were like, we can't be your parents anymore, and so they gave her back up to the adoption agency and things. So she's had a lot of run-ins with kids. I'm just going to just say that based on what the documentary has shown, she's had a lot of run-in with these kids, with various kids. And to me, it's very concerning, to be honest, because kids are vulnerable. You know, she was vulnerable. Kids are vulnerable. And it just seems like, to me, everybody's like, oh, she's a victim, she's a victim, she's a victim. But nobody's looking at the kids who arm she twisted or that she fell on or whatever the story is. Depending on who you talk to, that story, you know, changes. You know, you talk to her, it's like, oh, like I fell on him. But I think when you talk to the family, I think they said it was like she twisted his arm or whatever. And from there, when they were walking out the room after they scolded her, she said, "I hate you." And then the next thing you know, they said, "Oh, well, you got to go." You got to get up out of here. And then next thing you know, you have Sue and other neighbors saying how she was being inappropriate with the kids at the apartment complex, and as well as other people, but we just gonna focus on the kids. And then you got this other kid who lives with the man who she was living with at the time of this documentary, talking about she was bitten by her. So I'm like, why is nobody is talking about the fact that, yeah, she's a victim, but she's putting other people into that space of being a victim too. Another thing that nobody is really talking about is all the many adoptions and the weird circumstances around those adoptions. So if I counted right, I think I did. I think the Barnetts were her fourth family. I think. I'll try to put it on the screen if I'm wrong. But I think the Barnetts were like her fourth family. And what was kind of weird to me is each family that she was with before the Barnetts, she wasn't with them really that long, maybe a year or two, the most 3 years, if that. And nobody's talking about that. Like, in my point of view, I just want to know, why was she taken back to the adoption agency so much? That is it for that point. I just want to know, why was she taken back to the adoption agency so much? I know for, I believe it was the family before the Barnetts, it was a situation with the child where she said she fell on him, and then I think it was a narrative of his arm being twisted or something like that. And then she told them when they were walking out the room after they scolded her that she hated them. And then the next thing you know, they gave her back to the adoption agency, or they took her back to the adoption agency. Then that's when the Barnetts came on the scene. And to me, I don't know, it just all seems so weird, because first off, I didn't know that you could just freely take somebody back to adoption agency after having them for, I guess, over a year. I thought it was a certain time frame that you had before you said, okay, like before you kind of got permanently with this person. I didn't know you could just take people back like that, because that is weird within itself. But for me, it was just definitely a red flag when she kept bouncing from family to family to family to family. And what was even more concerning for me was the people who they said that the man had like really good discernment, and he was like, nah, I don't think this is gonna work out. And next thing you know, she ends up with the Barnetts and stuff. So all of this is just, it's very weird. It's just very weird. And I'm like, nobody's looking into this, because I mean, I don't know. Like, I didn't know that you could just take somebody back if you don't mesh with them after a certain time. I knew there would probably be like a grace period, and I'm not making this sound too great right now, but I figured it probably was a grace period, but I didn't know that you like, oh, I adopted this person, but this person not working out, and I can take them back. Like, most people, and I'm saying this in all seriousness, most people, when they adopt somebody and they bring them into their home, the family wants to make sure that these people are acclimated to the family as best as possible. And I feel like they aren't going to give up on people that easy. So in my point of view, what I am interested in knowing, and maybe discovery, if you watch this amongst all the other people who have reviewed this, if you could just answer that, if you could just put that into the next, season 3, because it seemed like it might be a season 3 coming. If y'all could put it into season 3 why each family was so willing to just give her back to the agency, and for the agency to not really do a good, in my point of view, they didn't do a good vetting process each time with trying to get her into a family that could handle the needs that she had, because she had some needs. She had some needs, some physical needs, and even from the documentary, it said that she, was diagnosed with, I believe that would be, I guess, like a mental or emotional disorder. So she had some needs, and so I'm just like, what? So another red flag that I saw that a lot of people aren't talking about was the outrage that Natalia had for the neighbors, for other people who she felt like should have came in and saved her from the Barnetts. And to me, it was really apparent that she was getting an attitude and that she was annoyed, and it was a lot of misplaced anger when she was having those one-on-one interviews with the camera, and she was like, oh, people would drive by and would see me in the window, or the neighbors knew what was happening and nobody decided to step in. And then it was even more articulated, that particular point of her just having a lot of misplaced anger, when she met with the quote-unquote nosy neighbor, and she was like, you knew that I wasn't like that, da 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 da. And I'm like, you upset at the wrong people, because most people are not, unless we see it ourselves, we're not gonna say nothing. Like, let's be honest, most people, they're not going to say nothing. You have a lot of people now, because this is out and about and is something that a lot of people are talking about, saying like, I would have did this and I would have did that. Yo, it's people next door, upstairs from you, downstairs from you, people in your family, okay? Let's be real. It's people in your family who you see argue, fight, do whatever, and you don't say nothing to them. And now all of a sudden, you would say something to that particular family. Most people not. Let's just be honest. Most people are not going to say anything, because we feel like that particular family, they are disciplining that child. We don't know what happened. Or if I'm riding down the road, when I'm riding down my street, I'm not looking in people's houses and their windows and stuff. Now I might look in the yard, and if I see something strange, I'm like, that's interesting. And, if it's too alarming, I might, call the police or whatever. But personally, I'm not going to get involved, because I'm not going to put myself in a dangerous situation. And that's how most other people feel. And I feel like she had a lot of misplaced anger, because she's like, you were an adult, da 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 da. Let me tell you something about adults. Most adults, okay, and I'm gonna be real, I haven't been an adult that long, but most adults, when I'm finding out in my, so far as being an adult, we mind our business, because we have our own stuff going on. You don't know what the nosy neighbor had going on. You don't know what the people across the street had going on. You don't know, the person might have been driving down the road, but you think they saw you in the window? You don't know what was on that person's mind. And so you're blaming other people for what that family did to you. So to me, it was just a lot of misplaced anger, of like, you knew I didn't X, Y, and Z. And let's just be honest. Let's be honest with this particular point too. When she was saying, like, when Christine told you all this stuff and you said that I couldn't see your daughter anymore or play with her anymore, or whatever the case may or may not have been, you know I didn't do that, so why did you go along with it? As somebody who doesn't have any kids, but remembers growing up with people who people in the community would talk about, and how my mom would not let me and my sister go over their houses for those exact same reasons. We didn't know. I'm put like this. My parents, they did not know if what those people were saying was true about those particular families, okay? All they knew was they weren't going to put me and my sister in that particular environment. They weren't going to continue to let us go over to that person's house and play with them. They knew they weren't going to even send us over there in the first place to play with them. They knew that we couldn't ride with them. They put up certain protections and provisions for us because we were their children. They didn't try to sit here and figure out if it was true or not. They didn't really care because, as I stated earlier, as an adult, you have other things that you are preoccupied with. And when it comes down to you and your children, you're going to do what you can to make sure that they are safe. So that lady, I don't take the neighbor to be somebody who was doing it out of malice or whatever. I feel like she was doing it out of protecting herself and her child. And I do not blame her for that because she didn't know if Christine was telling her the truth or not. And most of the time when somebody tells us stuff, especially if we have a really good relationship with that person, we are not going to think that they're lying because we trust that person. We think, why would this person tell me a lie about this, that, and the third, even if it sounds crazy? Most of the time we're like, yeah, this sounds crazy, but I'm going to do what I need to do to protect my children. I'm going to do what I need to do to protect my household. So, in my point of view, Natalia had a lot of misplaced anger at the neighbors and at those around who she felt like should have stepped in to help. But at the same time, it's like you need to focus your anger on the Barnetts because they are the people who adopted you and treated you as you have stated. So, and as Michael has stated, so you can't blame the neighbors. You cannot blame the neighbors. If anything, you have to, just say, I wish I would have stepped in, but you cannot be upset at them because at the end of the day, they have a responsibility to protect them and their families. And you are a child, or you were a child at that particular time. And so most of the times when parents get together and they talk about what their kids are doing and going through, one parent is going to believe the other parent until they see otherwise. And once they see otherwise, then the other parent might step in and say, hey, we might want to get CPS involved. We might want to get this person involved. Hey, let me just take them for the night and give you a break or whatever, until they see stuff like that. But you can't get upset because people didn't do what you thought they should have done. Another red flag nobody is talking about is the fact that nobody is really talking about the independent neighbor interviews or even the interviews from the nurses who were nurses at the mental institution that Natalia was in. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about how those people gave interviews of what they saw on the daily with Natalia, the interactions that they had outside independently of the Barnetts with Natalia. And to me, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, she's doing it because she was a child, this, that, and the third. But okay, all right. So we're just gonna ignore some of those things that they said. For instance, I go back to Sue, who talked about how Natalia would just walk in people's houses, or she'll be sitting on the curb waiting for people to come home, or how Natalia would be inappropriate with older people who weren't children and things of that nature. So it was a lot going on. And a lot of people are saying, well, she's showing signs of this and she's showing signs of that. But we need to unpack this because it's easy to kind of look at it on a very iceberg level where we see it and we kind of dismiss it because of what she went through with the Barnetts. But we really need to look at, the bottom of the iceberg that we can't see, under, and really start to unpack and kind of pull it up some so we can really see, okay, well, why was she like that with those kids, allegedly? with Sue's grandson. Why was she going into people's houses like that? Why did she have the neighbors afraid to come home? You know what I mean? Like, come home and think that they had to kind of duck and dodge her because they didn't want her coming over because of this, that, and the third. And even, you know what? And there was another incident with one of the neighbors where they were like, she walked in their house. According to the neighbors, she walked in their house, allegedly. Let's go ahead and put it out. But all of this is on season 1 and season 2 of those documentaries. And the only way they knew that she had walked in because the dog was barking. And when they went to see what the dog was barking at, it was Natalia going upstairs to what they suspect their son's bedroom. So it's a lot. It's a lot going on. It is a lot. This whole season 1 and season 2, this whole situation is just red flag central. And I do want to emphasize Natalia is definitely a victim. I feel like she is a victim. And I feel like because she does, in my point of view, carry that trauma with her, everywhere she goes is something. Because the next red flag was the fact that at the end, well, let's start here. The other red flag was throughout the entire season 2, even parts of season 1, but really it was showcased in season 2. The mans were, this is our girl, we love her, she has adjusted so well, this is our child, our daughter, blase, 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 right? The last 5 to 10 minutes of the last episode of season 2, we hear a phone call from the mans, right? And we hear them saying like, oh, like Natalia is tweaking. We feel like prisoners in our own home, and blase, blase, blase. Some of the same stuff that other people have repeated throughout season 1 and throughout season 2. And it's like, somebody told me one time, if a person has an issue everywhere they go, it's not everybody else. It's not everybody else. We have to look at the common denominator. And the mans were already kind of iffy because it was like, yeah, you took this young lady in, but they were doing a little bit too much for me, especially when he was like praying on that stuff. And I'm like, sir, like sir, if you know, you know. If you know, you know. But I really say that to say this about the man's, like, they went from like so lovey-dovey with her to like, oh, she's tweaking. So what happened? What happened between the time of y'all taking care of her, y'all adopted her during season 2, to now y'all giving the producers of the show a call saying like, oh, she gotta go, she tweaking? What happened? What happened between all that? And I mean, at this particular point, and I'm just gonna read off my notes because I don't know. We got the mans saying she's the enemy. We got Michael Barnett saying, holding true to his stories about his interactions with her. And, I really don't know. I don't know. And I don't know what to believe. I mean, I really don't. I don't know what to believe. I really don't. I could not tell you. I don't know. Like, usually when you watch a documentary, you walk away from it with a good understanding of what's going on. This, every time you pull back a layer, every time you think you on Natalia's side, something happens. Every time you want to believe the Barnetts, then a story come out and it's like, no, let me go back in the middle of the road. And it's like, usually when you watch a documentary or something, usually you can go to the right or to the left. about how you feel about it. This, I'm just and I think a lot of people are just in the middle of the street because we don't know who to believe. We don't know what to believe. We don't know what is going on, because I'm gonna just be real. I feel like everybody lying. I feel like everybody lying, except for the neighbors. I'm just gonna be real. Except for the neighbors, I feel like everybody lying. And the medical staff who was at the mental institution that she was in. But outside of those independent interviews, I feel like everybody else is lying. I'm being completely honest. I feel like everybody else is lying, or if they aren't lying and they are telling the truth, it's not the full truth, which is very concerning, because I feel like with such a story like this, where you keep pulling back the layers and it gets crazy and gets crazy, gets crazier, it's going to take somebody to tell the complete truth for us to be able to make a decision on how we really feel about it. Because right now, I feel like I don't have a dog in the fight. I feel like none of us have a dog in the fight, but I feel like we want to know who's telling the truth and who's lying. And right now, we don't know. We don't know whose side to go on. And, you know, I walked away from season 2 just as confused as I was in season 1. The only thing I do know for sure is that Natalia is definitely a victim. And I've said that throughout this because I do want to emphasize she's a victim. She's a victim of circumstance, from being an orphan in Ukraine, coming over here, going through all of those different families who have adopted her, what she went through with the Barnetts, and even now with the man situation, with them calling her, saying she is the enemy. So they went from loving her to feeling like she's the enemy and that she's tweaking and that they feel like enemies in their own home, to now I think from what I've seen on like other like live streams and comments and stuff, like she's living with somebody else and she has a GoFundMe and stuff. Like it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier and crazier. So I don't know, but I did want to just point these red flags out to people. Let me know down in the comments. Did you catch these red flags? How do you feel about these red flags? Are these red flags not as concerning to you? Because they are concerning to me, because we don't know who to believe. We don't. But definitely drop that in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and let me know how you feel about this. If you want us to, as a channel, go over every episode, do a live stream or whatever, we can definitely do that. But and we can have some good conversation around this. But I just really wanted to just talk about these red flags and nobody else is talking about, and see, was I the only person just catching this? Because I'm just like Natalia, like why are you doing this to these other people? Or like talking to the families, like, why would y'all adopt this girl? If anyway, remember to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.